You know what kind of week it is when I started recording my first segment of the Devlog on Wednesday, and that is a week in which a lot is going to have to happen in order to make this an interesting one, so stick with me and find out. This week is mostly going to be in the theme of animation and remodeling. As you've been able to see over a couple of live streams, I've remodeled my player character, and now that remodeling has finally been imported into the Unreal Engine. So my player character now looks like this, which is a massive fucking improvement over what it used to be, which I don't even think I have that set up in the engine anymore. But you can go back into previous videos and compare the two. This looks infinitely better. But with that comes also having to introduce new animations. And I'm doing all those manually myself. I'm not going off any stock animations because I want everything to be flowing together smoothly, because that'll hopefully increase the smoothness and satisfaction of like the feeling when you're playing the game. So I've got a couple of animations ready. Most of this devlog is probably going to be Blender. And we're going to go over to Blender right now, actually, because I have a couple of different animations here. So as you can see, we have the running cycle, which we'll go into engine in a moment, and you can see that in action. Then I've got a different running cycle, which is a Naruto run. I initially wanted to go with this Naruto run as the running cycle, but it just didn't end up really working out that well, and it's also kind of broken, which doesn't matter because we're going to end up using it. Then this one we have, oh yeah, that's the wall slide. This definitely is going to need a little bit more work. I can't see it in action yet in engine because it'll only work once I have made a jumping animation, which I don't have yet. So this one exists, but I don't know what it looks like in game quite yet. But it's fairly slow, just like bowing back and forth a little, having the hands and feet, maybe you can see, slide up and down just a tiny little bit. And it's a little bit more of a Spider-Man pose rather than the grabbing onto the wall pose that I had before. Technically, the animation that I was using before for the wall sliding was a ledge grabbing animation, which obviously looked a little weird. So now we have a proper wall slide animation, which again is very much Spider-Man inspired. Next up we have a normal walking animation, which nobody's gonna fucking see. The only time you're going to see this is if you inch very slowly forward using a analog stick on a controller like this one, right? If you just inch ever so slightly forward, you'll see this walking animation. Most people are not going to be doing that. Most people will just go full force ahead, I imagine, and we'll be seeing the running animation. And you instantly go into that running animation if you do that, because the acceleration of the character is so goddamn high that you pretty much reach maximum speed instantly if you just go full force. And if you're playing on a keyboard like I've been doing for the testing, you can't even do any sensitivity stuff, so you just go running immediately. Then we have one more, and I honestly don't remember what it is. Oh, that's the idle animation that you've already seen. So it's just him breathing a little bit, like going down, breathing out, breathing in. I'm probably going to animate some more idle animations that happen when you're standing around for a long time. You know, the thing Sonic often does when you just don't touch the game for like 5 minutes. He starts to look at the camera, like at its watch, or whatever. I'm probably going to animate a couple of things like that, but that's like polishing stuff way later on. For the time being, this is every idle animation I have, which is literally just him standing and breathing. So going back to the engine here for a quick moment, I have two projects open at once. Okay. I also just packaged my VR game and published it to itch.io. So if you want to see that, link down below in the description. So this is what the running animation looks like as of right now. It definitely needs a little bit more oomph to it, if you know what I mean. Because it kind of feels like he has a bit of a limp. He probably needs to be leaning forward a little bit more. And that's all the animations I have. So the jumping looks really fucking goofy at the moment as well. But that's what we're going to be doing this week, is lots and lots of animation. Most of this I did at points where I couldn't record, because I can animate in Blender while I'm rendering videos and stuff relatively well, because it doesn't take that much in the way of resources, but recording not so much. But now that I've gone through the Monday and the Tuesday and the Wednesday, I'll have a couple of days to record a lot of animation for you guys. So let's hope that it's interesting. Over here in Blender, we have my character rig, which looks a lot more complicated than it really is. Let's just clear all transform real quick. So that's the T-pose we have. Going over the rig real quick, let's go to my cursor on tweaking mode instead. We have the IK handles for the arms, so that's this and that, which inverse kinematics. It's if you want a more in-depth tutorial about that, I can do so, but you can also just Google it. We have the pull targets for the arms, which are these two little things, which is where the elbow is pointing at. Then we have the IK controllers for the legs, which do the same thing as the arms. Same thing here. Where do the knees point? Then we have the torso location and also the hip location, which is slightly different, which we can also like bend over. This is the head location, and this is a extra bone here that also influences the head quite a lot, actually, more so than I initially expected, but is mostly for like making this little thing bounce a little to give it a bit more like physics feeling. And then we have like collarbones type stuff here. So this is upper body rotation with also location, and these are the shoulders. So those are the only real bones you have to worry about. Then you have these little blue things which you can use to tweak, literally called tweaking bones. Usually I keep those off until the very end, but I do want the IK to be turned on. So that's really all there is to it for the rig. And what we do is we go through poses, one pose at a time with some reference. So I'm going to start with the jumping animation up next. And I've got some references here for jumping animations. The downside being is I've got a lot of references here, but as you can see, a lot of these references aren't really made with games in consideration. Because the thing with games is, and animation. In animation, usually you have a pretty obvious wind up to an action. Because we call that anticipation. Because you want to see somebody wind up for a punch and then deliver the punch. Number one, that's partly to tell the viewer what's about to happen, so they can keep pace a little bit more with what's happening on screen. And number two, a wind up for a punch will make the punch feel more heavy. And the longer that wind up is, the heavier the punch generally ends up feeling. Like if I just like pull back quick and just throw a jab at you, you will feel like that's not a very heavy punch. Whereas if I take like 2 whole seconds to do this and then throw the punch, where the punching goes at the exact same speed, it feels a lot more heavy. That's a principle in animation. The thing with game animation is that, especially with things like a jumping animation, you want that to happen the instant you press the button. So you don't really have time, even a couple of frames, to do anything like that. Because at that point, you will feel like the game isn't responsive and it's being sluggish. So with a lot of these reference sheets I have right here, and these are very realistic ones, which I don't want. So cartoon animation, maybe like cartoon, jumping animation cartoon frames. Taking that into account, like this is a lot more like what I am imagining my jumping sequence to be like, right? So you have a getting ready pose, then we're starting to bend the knees, then we really like go down into the knees, butt backwards, then we get ready to push ourselves up, and then we jump. And then we have a landing sequence much the same as well. Issue is I don't have the time to show this and this, and maybe even this, I gotta start my animation sequence at this pose. And it might be a good idea for me to go through some jumping animations of other platforming characters like Mario, like Sonic, just to see how they deal with this kind of stuff. Because I honestly expect that it'll just cut from one pose, the walking, running animation, whatever you're doing, to being already at this pose. Because you can't have that wind up. Because even if this is 1, 2, 3 frames, which it wouldn't be, this would be like, there would be 1 or 2 frames between every single one of these poses at least. But even if this is 3 frames, that means that you see the jump happening 3 frames after you press the button. At which point you can't have the character jump until the animation allows for it. So at that point you're jumping 3 frames after you press the button, which is a big fucking no-no because I'm making a platformer game, right? So I've got to start here. And that makes my job animating easier because there's less poses to go through. But it also makes it harder because you want the weight and satisfaction of an animation without having the benefit of anticipation. So that's a little bit of animation theory for you. Now let's see how that goes into practice. Probably rather badly. The thing I showed you before also is a 2-legged jump, where I think it'll make more sense for my jumps to be with 1 foot forward because they will be running jumps. Whereas the jump I showed you was a standing jump. So I think the most logical thing to do at that point is take a pose from my running animation and go from there. So we can open this one up, start editing. Wait, what? So we have a number of poses here. These are just normal running cycle poses that you probably are aware of if you've ever done any type of animation of this sort. But then we gotta pick a pose. And the thing is, really there's only half as many poses as it looks like here, because there's a sequence for the left step, there's a sequence for the right step, there's also a lot of birds outside. I fucking hate them as well, don't you worry. We've got to decide whether or not we want to start our jumping animation with a left step or a right step. I could potentially make a variation for both, and one day I might if it really ends up being that obvious. Because I can just make a variable that changes from left foot to right foot depending on what is the last one that touched the ground, right? And depending on that, I could play one animation or the other. I really don't want to if I don't have to, though, because that's a lot of work, which I don't feel like doing. So I'm going to take all of these keyframes from this thing over here, and then I'm going to put this action all the way the fuck back over there, and I'm going to make a new action, which I do through here. And then I am still editing the old one, I think, so I probably should be careful. Okay, so we've got a starting pose. From there, what we probably want to do is we want to move this foot back to a somewhat neutral position in space. Then we want to have this leg at least move a little bit, because otherwise it's going to be way too stationary, right? So move this a little bit closer to what it would be like in a normal running animation. But we definitely want to do that not at the same frame. So I just tend to, when animating, jump 10, 20 frames ahead with every pose and then do the timing later. So I'm going to do that again now at the proper place. But we also want him to go quite a bit down with his knee. Again, all this is probably going to happen in like 3 frames at most. If I end up using this bit at all, which I still kind of doubt that I will. Definitely want the hands to be lowered as well to fit, and you should be moving a little bit back and down, I want to say. This might end up not looking very good. I am kind of doing this just by feel, because I don't really have any very good reference sheets for this, which kind of sucks. Anyway, now that I've made something that looks like a halfway decent pose, I press I and apply these keyframes to the whole character, and then I see what it feels like when this animates. That actually doesn't feel too bad. Like, the upper body definitely needs some movement, but that's the kind of tweaking that I'll do later. So let's go to frame 40, and from there we want you to definitely jump the hell up. The 2 feet are probably going to be in sync again, I want to say. Maybe have this one slightly lower still. And with the toe pointed slightly down. So the way we do that is first we rotate the foot down a little. This definitely needs to be a lot flatter. And then we can move it down a little bit. And then when that's rotated down, we rotate this one back up a little. And that should give the feeling of the toe having just touched off the ground a bit. Now, what to do with the arms? I want to say I'm going to have him, for the time being, just like kind of spread his arms out wide is what I want to say. So let's go move towards a T-pose type pose for the arms. I can always try to change that later, I suppose. I really don't know if there's anything better. Maybe arms backwards for when he jumps. Kind of like alluding to the whole Naruto run thing that didn't work. I kind of just want to implement that because I think it really fits the character design very well. It just didn't fit the like the movement speed and everything like that for the running animation. So let's do that. Let's do that. We're not going to go full Naruto here. Because that feels a little too much, but just having the arms go backwards a little, while probably not that great for jumping from a like balancing dynamics perspective, I feel like makes a certain amount of sense. So let's see. Okay, that doesn't feel too bad. The right foot definitely needs something else to do though, because this isn't quite it. Not at all. Maybe we move him forward a little. Maybe that's what we need. And we definitely need you to be a little bit more. We also need the pull target to not be fucked up. That might help. It's something that I forget a lot. It is moving the pull targets, because usually it just kind of works out. But sometimes things get a little iffy and it doesn't work out, so you have to play around with it a little. Okay, then we make another pose that's very similar to this one, but just slightly different, so that we have a little bit of liveliness while going upwards. And actually, up and down are going to be separate animations, so from here we probably have the jumping up animation. Then we're going to have to make the falling cycle, which is the animation that plays after this one, but before we land. We could make a landing animation. I don't know that we'll have to. Maybe we should, but maybe we shouldn't. I don't know. We're going to skip that for as long as we can. Yeah, this is just moving him to the pose for the falling animation. And then we can start the following animation with the last pose of this animation, so they are 100% seamless going into each other, which is why I wanted to animate this all by hand, to have that seamless transition between animations to begin with. So obviously that's what we're going to have to do here, which is more difficult than it sounds. I'm moving the arms out a little bit and moving the pull targets out as well. I think that will end up working out, and then we can have him do a little like hands doing like a little like this in the air while he's falling. I think that'll be good. And in theory, this should be the jumping animation. So we step and go up. Again, we still have some anticipation going on here because we need to do this entire thing, and here is when we can start lifting off the character, which at this point would be 30 frames in, but obviously we're going to shorten that down to like this being like 5 frames, but for literally all of the keyframes instead. So this should be like 5 frames. It should be really fucking quick, and then this should be probably been happening within like a couple of frames as well, so another 9 frames before that, and then this has to be a little quicker as well to match that speed. And we have, I think it can be even faster, honestly. I think this still is a little slow, which is good, because if it feels too sluggish, that means we can get away with faster animation, and faster animation for an action like this is very much a good thing. So let's slow this or speed that up. Let's speed that up, and let's even speed this up. So the total animation time from being on the ground to being in the air is 14 frames now. That still might be a lot, actually. That actually doesn't seem too bad. But the right foot doesn't really do anything for that last little bit. That's why it looked weird before. Okay. Let's move you back and up a little in that case. Let's see if that maybe makes things seem a little more dynamic. I think it does. So now it's just a matter of adding upper body details, and we've got a jumping animation, I think. Okay, so first and foremost, this definitely needs to go up again a little bit, which means that everything has to go up a little. I don't know how much of the actual like animation needs to go up and how much of the like actual character going up will offset that, because obviously the character will also, like, the object will be going up in the air, so maybe I don't need it to go up at all, and I can cancel that out again at some point. I don't know, we'll see. Actually, let's just assume that's the case for the time being, and only worry about the head movement. So from here to here, we probably want the head a little tucked in, I think, right? So just like do it a little lower, make this a little lower as well. Again, that little bit of anticipation, as long as you can get away with it, very much a good thing, especially since the style for this game is a little bit more cartoony than realistic, which is very much on purpose. So I want things to squash and stretch as much as possible, because that's the very Disney-like, Looney Tunes-like feel that cartoons are really known for. And I want to replicate that to a certain extent in 3D. And we then squish, squash, stretch, that's the word I'm looking for, on the upward. So we squash a little on the downwards, we stretch a little on the upward. And then we can stay slightly stretched, I suppose, but not too much. And that makes it feel a lot more bouncy. Yeah, I like that. I like that. Okay. But we still need a little bit more rotation in the head. And then we need to worry about this bone over here. You can see my cursor, right? Yeah, then we need to worry about this bone over here to add a little bit of like delayed physics to it. Because I'm not going to simulate that. I am hand animating that, which is probably just not a good idea. I'm going to be honest with you. Okay, so you go down and then you go up. So in going down, there's really not a lot of delay because it'll go down with the rest, but let's just pull it up ever so slightly, then you go up, and their gravity will take a moment to catch up. So we do this, and then we do that. And then not until this point it catches up. Okay, so what does that look like? That actually looks pretty good. Like bouncy, satisfying. I quite like that. I quite like that indeed. So let's select everything and do the thing that makes animation hack 101. Interpolation mode, Bezier. Makes things a lot smoother. It doesn't always work for everything, but it gives you a little curve between every keyframe at the start and end, and not just like a linear line. Makes things feel a lot more organic. And that's the jumping animation. I was thinking it was going to take me an hour. I've been recording for 25 minutes. I'm going through these. This is actually going a lot better than I initially expected, and that is very much a good thing. And after spending most of my Saturday and missing the upload time for this video, sorry about that by the way, on troubleshooting a lot of animation stuff and just testing it out in Engine, I finally have something that mostly works. I still need a couple of animations to be made, but from here I think things should be relatively easily done, because I'm in a rhythm right now. I've learned a lot right now about what works, what doesn't work, and we'll go over that real quick. So I have my animation blueprint as I have it right here. It's a lot simpler than it was before, because there's a lot of animations that I imported before that I'm not using anymore because I have a particle system for the dash, for instance, right now. So that simplifies things a lot. I still need a wall jump and I still need a double jump animation. Those two are still going to be relatively tricky, but let's get into what I learned. So first and foremost, the thing that you saw me make as far as the jump start animation goes, I have changed around quite a bit, because as you can see, there is actually, this is supposed to start roughly around here. That's a very good question, why that's not importing that way. So the idea behind that would be that if we remove all the frames up until now, we have no anticipation for this upward movement at all. We can get much more instant feedback, and that feels just a little more snappy and a lot more satisfying, right? Rather than it having to wind up. In normal animation, you want that wind up time, but it really seems like game animation, specifically input action animations, you want to skip any kind of wind up. You want to have the moment you press that button, have the action happen. So if you are making a jumping animation where you should be going down before going up, the downward movement you just cut out altogether. Because the moment you press that button, you want to be jumping upwards. That's what makes things feel snappy and responsive. And honestly, now that I've removed those like 50 frames, this feels even better. Does it look very fluid? No, but that's the thing. I try to make things look fluid before, but fluid movements aren't snappy movements. And for input control, you want things to feel snappy. So that's that. Everything else fluidly goes over into the next animation. This seems like it's one animation, right? But it's like 3 or 4. Because then we have, once we reach the end of the start jump animation, that last frame is the first frame of the falling loop animation, which loops, so that last frame is the exact same again. And the last frame for that one is the same as, where is it? As the jump end. And the jump end can happen at any moment in the jumping or the falling loop animation. But because it's still based on this same pose as the first animation, it flows over a lot better as well. Because you've seen that movement, you've seen that pose come by a couple of times as you were falling. So it doesn't feel weird when you see this move into, and then we have this like little bit of squashing going on, and then going up right to the first frame of the normal running animation. I need to make a variation of this animation still, which from this squatting position goes to the normal idle pose. Because if I now jump while not running, you can see there's a little bit of a jump cut. I'll go to a place where you can see it a little bit more easily. You can see there's a little bit of a jump cut there. It's not too bad, but it is better if I make a separate animation just for that. So that's the jumping cycle. I have it finished. This is what the jumping cycle is going to look like in my game, and I might end up going back to this and improving on it later on at some point. I also have the wall slides implemented, by the way. But that still's kind of fucking with my character's orientation. So don't worry about that. We'll do that when we get to it, probably next week. When we also do the wall jump and the double jump animation. And from there, I will have reanimated my entire character. I will have remodeled my entire character. At that point, there's a couple AI enemies left to make. And then I have a new prototype build, I want to say. Because the levels that I made before are still there, but this character controller is absolutely fucked and probably won't work with the new animations and stuff like that. So, but the levels that I made before are not going to be in this new build. The only level that is going to be in this new build is the PC hub world, which still needs a lot of work, but it's this one is going to be in it. And that's going to lead you into this level over here, which is my my testing level. And that's everything there's going to be to the new build. So I need to finish this off by creating 1 or 2 more AI enemies. I need to... probably going to actually make like a menu screen for this one. Maybe not. I don't know. And from there, I think we're about ready to have people start playing this new version, because a lot has changed, right? A lot has changed in looks, in feel, in general gameplay idea. I've gotten a new concept for a world, by the way, that I'm really, really excited about making as well. But a lot has changed here, and honestly, running through this with my own custom-made animations, it's actually kind of cool. I actually really kind of like it, and I am surprised at how well these animations ended up coming through. Because at this point, so that's still a little buggy. At this point, the game is playable with these animations, right? Like the double jump doesn't have an animation into itself, which is a little weird, but it works. Right, that works. It's not great, but it is functional. The bugginess for the wall jumping definitely needs to be fixed up. And the actual wall jump itself, it needs a bit of a animation, but that also is a thing that that just kind of works as is as well. So from here, this is playable. Like before, we didn't have a proper jumping animation, and for a platforming game, I would argue that, okay, except for that bug, I would argue that a jumping animation is required to call your platforming game playable. We have an entire working jumping sequence now. So that's been the devlog for this week. I'm going to edit this and upload it as soon as I can, which is probably going to be tomorrow morning. Because by the time this gets up, I'll probably just want to go to sleep at some point as well. Next week, a little more animation, a little AI work, and I also have another project planned for a game made in a day. I actually have 2 planned. I don't know which one I'm going to do first yet. You'll see that when you see that.